Happy Thursday. Happy Thursday. It is Transformation Thursday. It is Therapy Thursday. It's been a while that I've gone live on my different platforms, but this is June, and June is Mental Health Awareness Month for men. Yeah, guys. Finally, we're paying attention to you. Finally, we're paying attention to the fellas. So, I'm Dr. Triphi. I'm a psychologist in Georgia. And on Thursday nights, about this time when everything is working well, I show up to talk about psychology, to talk about tips and strategies and ways to help us think better so we can feel better and we can do better. Can you imagine that it's already been 5 years since I've been doing these podcasts? I started during the pandemic and then just continued. And many of you have continued with me, and I really appreciate that. I really appreciate all Thursdays together when we can do it. So, what am I doing tonight? I want tonight to dive in honor, as I said, of Men's Mental Health Awareness Month. I want to dive in to a topic that is near and dear to my heart. It's near and dear to my heart. They say charity begins at home. And one of the things that I kept coming upon doing my graduate degrees, I have a master's in counseling and I have a PhD in clinical psychology. With each of these degrees, as you comb the literature, something strikes you as a person of color. For me, what struck me the most is that almost every topic in the literature, it would say something like this: there is a dearth of literature, or there's a paucity of research when it comes to, say, African Americans or Black people. Like I said, charity begins at home. One of the things I believe in strongly is that professionals have a responsibility, a duty. Professionals of color have a responsibility and a duty to add to information out there regarding people who look like us, because the research says over and over and over again that there is a paucity of research, meaning not enough research, and that there's a dearth of literature, meaning you really have to call through the literature to find out more about the experience of Black people. Now, imagine a subset of Black people, Caribbean Black people. That's my subset. So that's my task tonight. Tonight, I want to focus the discussion and the exploration of the topic, particularly on Black men from the Caribbean. I want to peel back some of the layers, and this is my first session, but I hope to invite professional men, regular day-to-day men who are out there hustling and doing their work onto the podcast with me on Thursdays for the next 3 weeks to see if we can peel back some of the layers of conditioning, that survival-based masculinity that many of our men have been armored with. Weaponized. From childhood trauma to identity, to love, to fatherhood, we want to go beneath the armor, beneath the protection to get to the little boy, because y'all, that's where the healing is. That's where the healing is. So whether you're a brother, you're a husband, you're a spouse, you're a friend, you're a therapist yourself who's supporting Black men, I want to invite you to come, let's unarmor, de-armor, whatever the word is, yeah? Because my strong belief is that real kings, if you think of a king doesn't just protect and provide. A king has a responsibility to heal. A king has a responsibility to heal. So, you all ready? I've been playing with the topic, and I'm finessing words, and I have a feeling I will keep working on the topic. But for tonight, the topic is really the boy beneath the armor, healing the inner child of Black men. Like I said, I'm going to focus it on Caribbean Black men. I want to define for you, I want to help you understand what inner child work means, why I think it's relevant to Black men, and I want to use the metaphor of armoring to help us understand some of the emotional defenses that our men have developed for survival. So I want you to listen to a letter. Dear Dr. Triphi, I'm a 38-year-old man from Trinidad, and this is the first time I'm putting these words out into the world. Growing up, I was taught that emotions were a weakness. My father was a hard man, police officer background, strict rules, no softness. I remember falling off my bike at 7 and crying. And he looked at me and he said, "Man up, you're not a girl." That moment stuck with me. I wore that message like armor. I became the strong one in every room, never showing pain, never asking for help. But inside, I was still that little boy, bleeding and confused, just wanting to be held. 2 years ago, I hit a wall. Anxiety, anger, and a deep sadness I couldn't explain. A friend suggested therapy. I laughed at first, but I went. And that's where I met my inner child. I've got notes for you tonight because I want to remember a lot of the things that I want to share with you. So, this person went on to say that through journaling and guided meditations, I began to speak to that 7-year-old boy. I told him it was okay to cry. I told him he was safe now. I cried for the first time in years, and it felt like freedom. I'm still healing, but now I don't wear armor every day. Sometimes I wear softness, and that's strength too. I hope that's going to be the story of some of you as you listen to me, because I want to provide you a path to get to that little boy and to get to some of that softness. So let's talk about context. How did we get to be like this? How did all men get to be like this? Historically, we're aware, at least on this side of the Atlantic, good evening, Petra, on this side of the Atlantic, of the legacy of slavery in the Americas, in the Caribbean. We understand that before slavery, that experience, we existed. We understand that, yeah? But during that process, it's impossible to deny the dehumanization of our men that occurred. It's impossible to deny it. It's irrefutable. The dehumanization, the forced labor, the family separation, there are words like buck breaking, the breaking of the spirit, the attempt to break the spirit of human beings. Buck is a male word, yeah? It's also a word for an animal. So the term buck breaking and the practice of buck breaking was a thing, breaking the spirit and the bodies too, but just not so bad that the use of the body was eliminated. So it was more spiritual breaking and a mental breaking. That forced Caribbean men, African American men, Black men on this side of the Atlantic, that forced them to learn emotional suppression as a way to survive, as a survival mechanism. Because if you put yourself in the picture, your complete whole self, your divine self, some people literally kings, princes, yeah, and being forced to endure some of these atrocities, but not wanting to break in front of your people, learning how to suppress your emotions as a way to survive. And so the theory is, and I mean, the understanding is that the strong Black man archetype was created as a byproduct of colonialism, of that trade of human beings. Yeah? The strong Black man archetype. You know him, he looks like grandpa a lot, or your dad. Emotional stoicism, meaning you don't see much feelings at all. Mm? Physical toughness, resilience, like continuing to go and go and go regardless of. Yeah? If you're a human being who's valued primarily for your ability to do physical labor on plantations, mines, construction, and not your artistic abilities, if your value was in how strong you were physically, how much load you could carry on your back, you know, how many whatevers you could pull behind you, how long you could stay in the sun, that's toughness. And without that, if you're in a cycle of that for 400 years, do you see how that gets cultivated? You see how that can get cultivated? Yeah. So I was thinking about this today. Understand this. So think of all the great painters of the world, right? That we were aware of. Michelangelo, artist, Sistine Chapel, yeah, Cezanne, Monet. These guys were appreciated for what? Their artistic talent, which is their softness. But if you're in that 400-year loop, who's valuing you for your artistry and your softness and your creativity? You're not valued for that. You're not needed for that. You're valued for your strength. Yeah? Nobody cares about your feelings. Nobody cares about your feelings. I mean, I think about it today, like tell your Caribbean mother that you want to be an artist when you're 10 years old and see what she says. See what she says. Well, our moms these days might say something different, but our generation, see what they would say. Yeah. So dehumanized and objectified as tools, literally tools of production, not as a full human being, not as a full human being. In fact, it was said that the African person on this side of the continent was not a full human being. I'm embarrassed to say it as a psychologist, but even in the field of psychology, Black people on this side were denied an understanding that they were also emotionally complex like anybody else, that they had feelings. So there were thoughts out there that Black people don't feel pain as much and that they cannot experience emotional, complex emotions, that they were less emotionally complex, and that they were incapable of deep emotional and intellectual experiences. That was the understanding, because it was meant to justify that they were somehow naturally more suited towards servitude. Servitude is serving other people, taking care of other people, doing for other people. That myth, it's a myth that Black men, Black people, we're talking about men tonight, were immune to mental illness. So there's a physician, Dr. John Galt, in 1848 at the Eastern Lunatic Asylum in Virginia. They call those facilities lunatic asylums. He said Blacks are immune to mental illness. And he argued that because enslaved Africans didn't own property at the time, which was a legal situation, or that they didn't, and because they didn't engage in civic life, going out to the bar, to the restaurant, to eat, to just sit in the park and enjoy the sun, to vote, because they didn't have any of that to do, he said, they were free from the stresses that cause mental illness in other people. So what does this myth do? If it's being perpetrated, it contributes to stigmatization of mental illness among Black people. Because now, if you're genuinely mentally ill, what does that get called? That gets called you're bad. That gets called you don't want to work. That gets called you're lazy, versus you have a mental health issue. We still have to fight and be constantly aware in 2025 that if a 10-year-old boy is, we call, misbehaving in class, that perhaps he does not need suspension, perhaps he needs to speak to the therapist. Perhaps the kid who we might identify as conduct disorder is really manifesting his trauma, behaviorally speaking. So those stigmas, they still exist. And as a result, you have neglect of Black mental health for generations. Because this process lasted over 400 years. So for generations, mental health gets ignored for a Black man. Dr. Benjamin Rush, who is one of the founding fathers of American psychiatry, he believed he had a name for it. He created a name for this to justify the fact that Black men, Black people, were not suffering from mental health illness. In fact, that they couldn't. He said they suffered from a condition called a negritude. Negritude. He coined the phrase. And his allegation was that Black people had an irrational desire to become white. So this is how he justified and he explained mental health challenges in Black people at the time. So we have a legacy that has persisted, even in the way we do intellectual testing, where people will tell you that Black people, they're less intelligent because they score lower on tests, on certain tests. Yeah. They forget to tell you that many of the items on certain tests are not part of what's called the general fund of information for certain cultures. And they forget to highlight those students who are geniuses at genius level. Yeah. So there's a lot of underdiagnosis. The research is clear on that. And there's a lot of misdiagnosis of mental illness in Black people. All right. So along come African American professionals who finally get to be able to go to school, study at places like Tuskegee, which was among one of the earlier universities, all Black students, yeah, where now you can focus and you can study. And one of them that I remember from my dissertation was Charles Prudhomme. And he began to challenge the narratives of the 20th century, a long time, y'all. I mean, because slavery began in the 1600s. So in the 20th century, he comes along, right, and begins advocating for competent care for African Americans and research that honors the lives and the experiences of Black people. Okay? We have to understand that based on those ideas, Black people historically have been punished for showing their vulnerability. Even our parents taught us to hide our emotions. Think about the history. Everybody's there to work. Everybody's there to work. Your cries, you're going to hold me back, little child, if you're crying. Little child, you might get a whooping from somebody else if you're not doing the work. Yeah, if you're not busy, if you're not looking like you're doing something. So historically punished for vulnerability. Our parents even do it still today. Some of them, they'll say, what do you have to be depressed about? What are you crying for? Let me give you something to cry about. Yeah. Punishment, punishment included things like kneeling on graders, holding weights in your hands from your own family members, right? And you were supposed to keep your face. There would be no screaming, no crying, no bawling to demonstrate your pain. So this has developed, and I think it's still present, a survival mechanism of emotional suppression to allow people to endure their pain, brutal pain too. Okay? Some of the ideas that our men also picked up about how to be masculine is based on Western patriarchal norms, yeah, which equate masculinity to dominance. To dominance. The man is in control, control, and emotional detachment. Black men have historically been denied then access to the full spectrum of emotions, especially tenderness and grief. I want to bring your attention to Michael Jordan's eulogy when Kobe died. Do you remember? And if you don't remember, I'm going to ask you as homework, as an assignment, as a task, as a follow up, to go look at what Michael Jordan said as tears streamed down his face, where he was basically saying this, you know, it's so hard to tap into your emotions and to express your emotions as a Black man because you're not often seen as emotionally vulnerable, and our men have been taught to not display their emotions. Okay, so slavery ends, but just because you end the thing legally does not mean that it's gone away, does it? It doesn't mean that it's gone away, right? So, Black men, here they are now, quote unquote, legally free. Now I've got to prove my worth. I've got to prove my value by being strong. By being strong, yes, disciplined, respectable. And they've internalized that idea that vulnerability is a liability, vulnerability is weak, especially in hostile environments that are not looking to support you. Yeah. And so they've passed these beliefs down generationally, often unintentionally, without even saying it, but having their sons witness how closed off they were emotionally, closed off. The media does its part. The media does its part in the way it portrays Black men as hypermasculine and violent and emotionally unavailable. You know, their relationships in the movies hardly ever work. Although we grew up, I mean, I'm speaking for myself, stable homes, stable marriages where you saw your Black fathers loving your mothers. Yeah. But the cultural idea is that boys have to man up and not cry. And when you look at a 14-year-old Black boy, young boy, the media, if he does something that many teenagers do, he gets called a man, you know, versus the language with, in other instances, you might hear child. You might hear child. Yeah. So adultification of Black boys happens fast. Why does this matter? Why does this matter? So understanding the history, I think, is valuable because it helps us keep things in perspective as we explore this topic for the next 4 weeks. Yeah? We want to recognize that emotional suppression is not a personal flaw. You weren't born with it. Suppressing your emotions is not a that's how I am. No. What that is often a historical inheritance. I watched my grandpa, my father, the men around them. That's how they were. And I didn't learn the skill because communication is skill building. It's not personality trait. It's not that's how I am. No, I did not learn how to do it. And if I didn't learn how to do it, the same way I can learn a new language, I can learn the language of communication. The same way I can learn how to speak French, because French speaking is not a personality trait, it's a skill. It's the same thing for communication. And so our men can begin, hopefully, to reclaim their vulnerability, their humanness, their humanity as a strength and not a weakness. I think if they're willing to engage in healing practices, because it's not going to come to you by osmosis. It's not going to come to you just by willing it. It's going to come to you by practice and by doing things like inner child work to reconnect with the parts of themselves that were silenced. Not because they wanted it to be silent as little boys, but because the environment said, man up. In fact, many of our little boys are being told, you're the man of the house, things like that. Yeah. There's been a lot of families have been decimated, many reasons. Yeah. We have those cultural expectations of being stoic, of like, I don't have feelings, I don't have emotions. I'm not going to show my soft emotions. Or men, they don't show, not don't. And generally speaking, many of them are not free with their sadness. They're not free with their not knowing. What is freer is access to anger. So many emotions, the whole range, right? That spectrum of emotions, helplessness, powerlessness, confusion, I don't know, feeling isolated, feeling alienated, that gets turned into anger because that's more acceptable. It's more acceptable to see it. Turns into irritability. It's more acceptable. Yeah? Our religion hasn't helped with the notion that the man is the head of the home. Our religions have not helped. And without a full understanding of the range of your emotions, many men have just clung to I'm the boss, and whatever I say, that's what's going to go. Yeah. So there's been an internalization of the idea that I'm a boss and I'm here to subjugate women and children. Yeah, subjugate, as opposed to live with and be with and listen to and experience life with. Yeah, there are phrases like "let big man talk." Yeah, almost suggesting like the other people don't get to have a voice, but that's been a way to rob men of experiencing that full range of emotions. Yeah. That, like I said earlier, that intergenerational trauma gets passed down through discipline and silence. We just like, well, this is how it's been and this is how it's going to be. Yeah. We have some post-colonial realities as well. Economic instability, migration, for us in the Caribbean, fractured family structures, that provider role, and its psychological toll. Yeah. Think about it. Well, I was thinking about it today and I thought to myself, I remember growing up, and I mean, I don't go to clubs much, but you would go to the club, and the guy who liked you, Caribbean, is paying for all your friends, you and all your friends. That provider role is very inbred in Caribbean men. Yeah, like very strong. But, but there's always a flip side of everything. If I am only seen as a provider, what else am I good for? Yeah. And when there's economic instability and the man is no longer able to materially provide, and where is my worth? Who am I? When my women begin to make and earn more than me, what does that mean for me as a man? Yeah. So that psychological experience takes a toll. Anxiety, stress, depression, emotional isolation, because if I've not learned the words or the way to express what I'm feeling, I might just hold it in. Add to that lack of mental health infrastructure, especially in the Caribbean. In the US, there is the structure, but the stigma is still so strong with our Black men over here that they're less likely to seek help. So that in itself is a mental barrier. So even if there's access through insurance and literally you could just call psychology today, a lot of our men don't take the next step of calling. Yeah. Now what do you have? What you have now is problems that could be solved going unchecked. Yeah. Emotional growth that needs to happen might not happen. So that can hinder emotional intimacy in our relationships because vulnerability begins to be seen again as a threat to our Black men's identity, many of them. So I'm going to stop, take a few questions. I'm going to stop and take a few questions and then go into some more of the psychological impact of our experience of our acculturation. Okay? Petra, you said, great topic. I met a lot of men with a similar story like the one you mentioned. I'm still hearing parents telling that to their children, men don't cry, boys don't cry, causing our men to become now emotionally unavailable to their children, not just to their spouses, to their children. Yeah, to their children as well. And so that's how the intergenerational trauma gets handed down because the son learns it. See, the girl might see the mom's model and say, okay, well, mom, women talk, women express themselves. But the boy is looking at dad, we're not going to be talking, not about our feelings. Yeah? Petra, absolutely correct. Vulnerability seen as a weakness, seen as a weakness. Okay? Marcia, thank you, my sister. You said, do I think this is causing a rift between Black men and Black women? Ooh, yes. There is so much noise, 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 noise. Is what it feels like to me. There's so much noise between Black men and Black women in 2025. It didn't start in 2025, but man, it's on a loudspeaker across the globe. It's on a loudspeaker across the globe. Okay, so part of what I'm thinking is Part of what I'm thinking is I actually, on some level, I think it's a positive that you're having this loud conversations about Black men and Black women and the roles and it feels like we're renegotiating these roles. It also feels to me like men who used to be very quiet of this generation are saying, well, you're going to hear how I feel You're going to hear how I truly feel, but I will tell you honestly, think about it in real life. It takes a while to learn any new skill. So if you're going to learn a language called communication, like say French, when you begin, it's not pretty. You are butchering the language. You're butchering it. You're saying all kinds of stuff, right? Looking weird, but at least you're trying. So I have to say, I appreciate our younger men, that 30s, there's a pocket, say they're like in the 30s, 40s, who are having a lot of loud conversations about how they see their role as men and not wanting it to be the stereotype that it's been because they're looking at some of it as having been unfair to them. So I appreciate them expressing their emotions about that. But I have to say that the way that it's being expressed, it feels, again, like you're just learning a new language. And so it's going to thrash itself out. It's going to thrash itself out. But those things take time in a culture. It's not as if, you're at your home and you're having a discussion. It's a loud, worldwide discussion. And I think the way in which it's being done is causing a rift, but people just have, I think, to be willing to stay in the conversation long enough to get to the answers. So you've got to thrash through this conversation about Black women's roles and Black men's roles, because men are redefining their roles. They're saying, I don't want this, I want this. If I'm going to do this, I got to see that, which makes a lot of sense to me. Women are also doing the same thing. So for me, the problem problem is showing up when if men keep some of the old patriarchal, what I say goes, let big men talk, but also asking for the freedom to express their vulnerability and their softer side, without understanding that there's going to be an emotional response and reactions from the other side, that's that's not going to happen. So I think it's quite okay to be having these loud conversations if that's the only way you see you can do it. Honestly, I would prefer if it was happening in a different way, but the closest I can liken it to is learning a new language. So if I didn't see from my dad how to communicate with respect, with love, tenderness, because my dad did not have access to that, he wasn't communicating in that way. So I don't have a model for it. So I'm finding my way. I'm thrashing about is what I say, trying to express myself. It's not going to be pretty here for a while. Yeah, it's very loud, and it's causing a lot of pain. It's causing a lot of pain. It's very loud. It's causing a lot of pain. But human beings don't like pain. Pain is a signal that we have to do something in a different way. So if it continues, I am sure people will make adjustments. I'm sure people will make adjustments in the way they're communicating. I think they'll become better, like more skilled at communicating their feelings, because again, remember, this might be the first generation where men are being so open with their emotions and so willing to say what they don't want, what they like, what they prefer. I think it would behoove men to spend more time also, like learning the ground rules. If you're going to learn a new language, they teach you the grammar, they teach you like how to conjugate the verbs, they teach you certain structures. And you have to be willing to learn those structures if you're not well versed in a new language, before just speaking, because you can cause a lot of damage and hurt That's something I would say about the way um, a lot of our men are coming or approaching having these big conversations where they're putting themselves in a vulnerable space, but it's still tinged with some of the old ideologies where I am the I am the provider, I am the boss. Uh, Women have left that construct a long time ago. So it's falling on deaf ears and it's causing a lot of consternation in Black women who are like, we don't believe that anymore. There's no need for us to believe that anymore. Yes, we see you and we appreciate you vocalizing that, but nobody has to be forced to go along with that plan because we've been doing another plan. Why? Because the economics are different. You know, women have economic stability. So you know, you might be talking. Yes, you're learning how to express yourself and you want to express yourself and all of that, but maybe the style in which you're doing it is not hitting the mark. And the point of communication is to hit the mark so we can be on the same page, so we can get each other. So I think that has to work itself out. I think that's going to work itself out. Yeah, I think that's going to work itself out, Marcia. And I hope it works itself out sooner rather than later because it's really loud. It's really loud. Marcia said it was extremely perverse. It really was extremely perverse. I mean, when you think about the things that were done to Black men in front of their families, in front of their wives, in front of their children, yeah, that stuff was quite perverse when you think about it. Yeah, quite perverse. So, okay, so let's continue. As we talk about men and the lessons they've learned about being masculine, connected to being a provider, a protector, uh, somebody whose your task in life is to preserve the family. Um, Maybe something that doesn't get said clearly enough is that provision is not just about financial or material provision. And perhaps some of the healing that will come for our men is understanding that they can redefine provision. In fact, the way women describe provision is also provision of your time, provision of your attention, provision of your affection, provision of your emotional presence, yeah, provision of uh, just emotional and psychological nourishment, not just money, you know, and a house and a car. That's something to think about. So, expounding on the psychological impact of that masculine construct that our Black men inherited, inherited in large measure. You have emotional suppression. Keep your feelings to yourself. Don't display your softer emotions. So that leads to challenges in expressing vulnerability, challenges in admitting I'm feeling afraid, or I'm feeling sad, or I'm feeling very anxious, and going instead towards anger, which is a big brother feeling that can show up and kind of mask the fear, mask the anxiety, mask the pain. It's more socially acceptable. Then you also have to consider mental health challenges biologically, right? Biologically, trauma based, as that trauma is handed down intergenerationally, because the father who is unhealed might be overusing some kind of substance to mask the pain. What happens with that? Family fractures. What happens with that? Perhaps the mother becomes overwhelmed. Perhaps the kids become overwhelmed, right? The child learns that, the child is traumatized by that, spends their life trying to put themselves back together because that child did not get what it needed from the father. We hand it down. We hand it down until somebody stands in the gap and does the work to heal their inner child so that they don't pass it on to their child. Right? That wounded inner child. How does it happen? Y'all, how does it happen? Childhood neglect. And neglect is not just they're not feeding me. Neglect is also attention, lack of attention, and lack of affection. Yeah? Abuse. Abuse is not just they're whooping on me and wailing on me. Abuse is they're calling me names and telling me I will never amount to anything. Abuse is when I'm crying, they say, get over it. But let's call it more like emotional abandonment. Yeah, big word. Yeah. So every human being, and I'm seeing that more and more every day, what somebody else might call a tiny infraction, somebody else calls that hurt me to my soul. We have to understand that. So when we're thinking about trauma, or someone so and so was traumatized by something that you might look at like, what? You're exaggerating. No, different soul, different heart, different person, different interpretation. Yeah. Wounded inner child. We're talking about the boy who was told, man up. Are you a little girl? Stop crying. Boys don't cry. Big boys don't cry. Yeah. So what does the little boy do with all of these feelings? All right. So what kids do with these feelings is they do the best they can, and they make decisions about themselves, and they make decisions about life, and they make decisions about people, and they make decisions about, well, how can I stop this pain? And from a child's brain, a child's perspective, from a child's psychological makeup, they do the best they can. Problem is, until that gets addressed, reset, reconnected, where does the little boy go? So even if the little boy is able to stack armor around him, his anger becomes his shield, or his silence becomes his shield, okay? Or drug use becomes his shield, the armor around him. Where did he go, even though he's armored? Even though he's got a shield, where did he go? He's still in there. The little boy is still in there, even though the man is now 6 feet tall. He has worked so hard. He is a millionaire. He's still the little boy inside. From a psychological perspective, the little child is the subconscious. Subconscious, that part of the mind where the stuff is below. It didn't go away, but it's below. It's not readily accessible. Like, oh, your conscious mind is where what's happening to you right now. You're on it. I gotta pay my bills. Let me call this person back. I see the light. This is conscious mind. This is waking mind. I'm up. But the subconscious is still there. That programming is still there. It does not go away until we intentionally reset it. So that's where healing can come, by working with the inner child underneath the armor, underneath the big soldiers. underneath the big soldier's weapons, right? The stacking of the armor. This um, okay, so my internet is a little unstable for some reason, so I am uh, trying my best to keep it together. If we fall out here, I'm gonna go on Facebook Live. Okay, y'all? This is what we do in telepsych. So those of us who work on computers, therapists like me who work on computers, we have to make sure we tell our clients that, hey, we might lose connection. And if we lose connection, this is what we do. All right. So um, Marcia says provision isn't always money. And she's correct. Provision is not always money. And a lot of us don't get that, right? A lot of men don't understand that. And if we're not willing to talk about it, we won't get it, right? And if partners aren't willing also to explain to their mates, that's not all I'm looking for or I'm needing. Yeah. And I might be completely able to take care of myself materially, but I need your support. I need to know you have my back. I need to know that you thought about me and you brought me a rose. Yeah. So healing practices for the inner child. We're talking about practices like journaling, visualization, and I'll explain a little more about that. We're talking about using affirmations, and my secret weapon and Marcia's secret weapon and many people's secret weapon, one of them, hypnotherapy. Hypnotherapy. Now, why do I like hypnotherapy so much? I like hypnotherapy so much because hypnotherapy allows you to go there to the subconscious plane of awareness and go exactly where the little child stored all of these experiences in a state of calm and quiet and focused concentration. It's one of the fastest ways I've learned to help people do that kind of work. And even if it's not a complete hypnotherapy session, even just being able to get to a state of relaxation and calm, this is a better space to do the work because that part of the mind becomes much more accessible. Journaling, drawing is another way. Visualization is very similar. It's a similar process. You're using a similar process as hypnotherapy, where in a state of calm and quiet, you use your imagination. You use your imagination to see, to see inside of you, insight, to connect to that part of you, because that's where you made those decisions about how you would be in life based on your experiences. Journaling is great, it's cheap. What I started off with is a letter, right? You can write letters to yourself, guys. You can write letters to yourself, fellas. Nobody's got to see your letters. Letters to the little boy. Yeah. Storytelling is another way. African people are orators and storytellers. So sitting and talking with someone about what happened gaining different perspectives about how you might have looked at it or how you could look at it moving forward. That's another way. That's another way to do it. Okay? Drumming, dance, even rituals, ancestral rituals. Drumming is very powerful. It's a way to get your left brain and your right brain in sync. So you can go into a state of meditation from drumming. Now, when you get into that state of meditation, you're accessing the subconscious much easier than if you're trying to do it, as if you're just talking to me. Okay? Community circles. Some people do that, where you have communities where you're sitting and you're talking through things. I would suggest our men come up with opportunities like that. There's somebody I want to invite onto this with me in a week or two, who I saw do a man's retreat in Dominica. I haven't reached out yet, but I'm going to reach out to him because I was thinking today he would be perfect to talk more about men healing their inner child, because men need opportunities like this. They do. Men need opportunities like this to reset, to heal in a space of safety where they feel, okay, I can let my guard down. It's all men over here, and I don't have to put up the facade, I'm a man, or if there are women there, right? So it's great when you just have men. Culturally, we have to begin to normalize our men being vulnerable. Partners, women, wives, mothers, I think we have a big role to play because we can normalize that vulnerability. We can encourage, call it emotional literacy, because it's like you're teaching a language. Communication is a language. You're teaching skills. Yeah. I think mentorship for Black young boys, I think there's another therapist friend of mine who we worked in the community for a long time, and we put together a mentorship kind of a ritual for boys. We were trying to work with the idea that boys become men, and we didn't do it for long. I think we maybe did one session. But imagine if in the community we had rites of passage. Imagine if we had really structured rites of passage or opportunities for young men where they would realize, okay, I am a man now, but that would be a process where men would facilitate it, right? Where men would facilitate it. I think we need to advocate for more culturally sensitive therapy that pays attention and that keeps this history of our Black men in mind. Yeah. And that we train more Black therapists, we train more Caribbean therapists, because these people already have an understanding, yeah, of that experience. So these are some of my thoughts about how we can begin to heal our men. I think it starts with working with the inner child, those emotions that we buried as kids. We think they're buried, but they're right there, and they're impacting our choices. Yeah, they're impacting our choices. They're impacting our ability to love, our ability to make money, our ability to succeed. They're contributing to addiction. They're contributing to relationship problems. And we have to do a better job. We can't continue like that. We have to do a better job. Now, the thing about life is, you can bring a horse to the water, but you can't make it drink. So, my strong invitation to our men is to drink water if it's good water. Drink water if it's good water. Drink water if it's good water. Yeah. And I think the time is and right, ripe and right for our men to do this kind of work so that you become the generation that stands in the gap and says, no, I'm not going to hand this over to my son. I'm not going to hand over all of my struggles to my children. I'm not going to. The thing is, you got to go back inside. You got to go back inside to do that work. You got to go back inside to do that work. It's challenging work. It's not an easy process, but why not? Because you're fighting yourself. You're fighting how you were raised. You're fighting expectations. You might be working with a female therapist like me, and you have your ideas about how men should be around women, but that female therapist might be the one who's most trained to help you the best. So that's what I mean about drinking good water. If it's good water, drink it. Yeah. So Petra says we have a lot of hurting men in our Black community. Most men also think therapy is for wimps. That idea, again, that vulnerability, talking about emotions, makes you a woman, makes you weak, makes you a wuss, makes you a simp. You hear many young men saying that the men who are connected to their emotions are simps. They've come up with a nasty word for it. Yeah. But really, they're describing men who are competent at communicating and sharing their vulnerability, sharing their emotions to facilitate relationships that feel better for both people, as opposed to the old idea that the masculine is the boss and what the boss says, that's it. Everybody does what the boss wants. That's great for the boss. Of course, that's great for the boss. But are we not caring about the kids and the women in that equation? No. So the women now who've evolved to a point where they don't absolutely need support to be successful in life, why would they say yes to that? So there must be a renegotiation. And I'm suggesting that healing the inner child is one path. Yeah. We need to introduce therapy at a primary school level, Petra says, so our boys can get comfortable with it. Look, in the schools over here, you can go to a counselor. So that's been an improvement. I think that's an excellent idea. That's an excellent idea. Because it is a language. Communication is a language that's learned. It's not, well, that's how I'm born and that's how I'm going to die. So I want to drive home the point again that the adult in us must look back and rescue the child in us, help the child to reset ideas, make new decisions that it did not have the language to make at the time of traumatic events. Okay? We want to pay attention to where we are hurting, and sometimes we might not have insight into what's causing the pain. We just know we're coming upon bad outcomes. When that keeps happening, follow, track, reverse those situations to find the root of that fruit. Yeah, track it. And one of the most powerful tools to track it is inner child work. Okay, as I said earlier, it is very overwhelming. Let me use that word. Listening to our young men and our young women go at each other in the social media space about who will be what and who wants what and all of that. I want to remind people that each person is an individual soul. So the idea that we have to do everything lockstep and barrel, It kind of doesn't make much sense. The idea that you, as a strange man, should be able to control a woman you've just met, that doesn't make much sense, you know. Um, that doesn't make much sense. You know, it's not as if her parents just created her for you. That doesn't make much sense. We've got to be willing to investigate where we're hitting a wall and backtrack, reverse, find the source, find the root of the problem, fix it. Yeah, learn skills so that we don't keep running into the same problems. Okay? Petra, you're very welcome. For this is session 1, and my intention is to do for the Thursdays in June for Men's Mental Health Awareness Month. So there are a lot of strategies to help our men and to help our boys. I understand that we have some deeper challenges that sometimes even the inner child work, you're going to need some medication support, or you might need some other interventions, but that is a powerful place to start. It's a powerful place to start. Okay? My name is Dr. Triphi. I hope you continue to follow me on Thursdays at this time for more tips and strategies to help us think better so we can feel better and we can do better. Peace. As we say in Dominica, nous que parler l'autre fois. All right? We will talk another time.